Welcome to Energy Stew. This is Peter Roth, your host, and I'd like to ask you, what level of consciousness are you living at? I presume because you're a listener of the show, that you're brought here because you're a high consciousness new to direct you to listen to this show. So I'm excited that I can tell you more about that and how we can look at even raising our consciousness levels. And to do that, I'm so excited to have two guests on the show who have a program that to offer for your own homes and your own cell phones even. And they are amazing what they've done and are offering the world. And so I'm speaking with Clayten Stedmann and Jeffrey Stegman. Clayten and Jeffrey, welcome to Energy Stew.
Thank you, Peter. This is Jeffrey.
Yeah, good to meet you, Peter. This is Clayten. Heard good things about you from our staff.
Well, I'm excited that they had good things to say. But I do get along with people because I always am working on increasing my consciousness and do have the program that you're going to be talking about in my apartment to keep my consciousness as high as possible. Mm-hmm. And so, but to start off with, I think it would be good to do a little, I wouldn't call it maybe a prayer or meditation or a ritual to get us going on this show, because I know you like to do that. So would you like to start one?
Sure. This is Clayten. As we were talking before the show, we told Peter that it's a tradition of ours to say a little prayer, do an invocation, and as sometimes happens, the hosts call us out and ask us to do it with the audience. So I'll start it off. I just typically start, and then I'll turn it over to you, Peter. And if you would like to contribute, you can. And if not, Jeff will, I guess, wrap it up. That's our typical pattern. Jeff, does that sound good?
Great. Sounds great.
Good.
Yeah. Yeah. So it'll be just very short. I just before we start these, I always increase my conscious contact with God. So I increase my conscious contact with you, Lord. And as I reach out to you, I ask you to come all the way to me in the ways that I may not be able to meet you fully. And to come into me today and speak through me, work through me, and these other men, if they choose that, so that we can speak the words that people need to hear. Be a conduit for your grace, your love, as this is the classic day of love, Valentine's Day. And I ask that all people that listen to this now and in the future are blessed and their lives are improved as a result of us spending this time together. And I'll pass it over to you, Peter.
And let us all experience our blessings in our lives, our love for so many people that love us and we love them, and how blessed that is. And just imagine our blessings increasing and increasing. Mm-hmm. And Jeffrey?
Asked to expand that circle of love that Peter started, first for ourselves. We asked for the support of, field of consciousness together, the three of us, and that includes each one of you that are listening. And this field of love, this consciousness of love, first for ourselves, for each part of ourselves, for those around us, our loved ones, our neighbors, expanding outward, really our town, our city, our country, and our world, and all of creation, as these consciousness fields do. All of creation is affected by each of us. So just ask for that, for a blessing of higher intelligence and consciousness to support us together in blessing the world and all of creation with this talk today.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And let's look at the idea of consciousness. And your work is all about raising consciousness. But what does that mean to people? How do people think of consciousness in terms of what it can do for them? Or, I mean, most people just think about thinking. You know, how does consciousness differ from thinking? You know, how do I explain consciousness to friends who have no idea of the meaning of it at all?
Well, maybe I'll start off and I'll pass it to Jeff. So we really specialize in creating consciousness fields, Peter. And so, for example, our home environment is a consciousness field. And if you have kind thoughts in the home, if you have a clean home, if you have an abundant source of income for that home that covers your needs, and you have extra, if you have beauty in the home, if you have art, if you have architecturally nice surroundings, nice colored, paintings, things like that, that will tend to create a consciousness field of love. And so if you are talking to people about consciousness, we start right from the lower levels. The classic lower ones are shame and guilt and hopelessness. We move up to, fear, and then anger, and then courage. That's where integrity sort of starts. And I'm mostly relating this to the Hawkins map of consciousness. That is a map of consciousness created by Dr. David Hawkins. It's a scale from 1 to infinity. And the human realm is 1 to 1,000. So each level of consciousness would have a number of microwatts of positive energy or electricity in the body. And so these lower levels, like shame is 20, guilt is say 50, anger is 100. Sorry, anger is 150, fear is 100, courage is at 200, 250 is neutral, 300 is willingness, 400 is reason, 500 is lovingness, the beginning of lovingness, and up through the mid 500s is unconditional love, 600 is peace, and then from 700 to 1,000 are states of enlightenment. So that's typically the framework that we will talk to people about when we talk about consciousness. So thinking would be something that consciousness would include and transcend as you move towards lovingness.
So thinking is kind of the operation of our minds, and consciousness is the umbrella, or let's say, I'm even thinking of a multicolored umbrella, and it changes its colors, how it surrounds our thinking, and helps us think better in higher ways and in more enlightened ways.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Peter, and that consciousness also, it supports our thinking by bringing in thoughts that may not be our own thoughts. That we make the distinction that thoughts can be made by the mind, but they could also come from other sources too. And the higher the level of consciousness, then kind of the more thoughts from a higher level come to us that are not necessarily our thoughts. So thinking seems to be affected by consciousness in that way. But I would kind of take a step back that consciousness is also really the basis of creation, that everything is consciousness in a way. Some of the early physics experiments with the photons and the slits, where the observation of the person is what determined the outcome of the experiment. And I think that's a real indicator that consciousness is basic and a part of the fabric of reality.
Well, one way that I like to look at it is consciousness affects everything, including plants. And so you've done research with creating high consciousness levels around plants and watch them flourish in ways that were unexpected. So that says that consciousness is actually an energy that raises some level of reality, maybe we can call it. And the higher the consciousness, the more refined the reality.
Mm-hmm. There is a concept that we work with that relates to environment being more important than will. And so, as Jeff said, we believe consciousness is a fundamental foundation to life. And the importance of being in a high consciousness area is that it will tend to lift you up, or at least keep you in a reasonable place, where if you're in a low consciousness field, it will tend to bring you down. So, for example, I've been in prisons once they're closed, but I haven't been in a prison when they're open. And they tend to be fairly low consciousness places because people are suffering. Battlefields are another classic. Old battlefields are a low consciousness area. Some graves are high, some graves are low. But any area where there's a lot of poverty, where there's a lot of struggle, dignity can arise out of that. But typically, that would be what we would classify as a low consciousness area. And it's harder to maintain that loving state, to be positive and progressive in your life when the neighborhood you live in, you could take it to that, is in is suffering, even economically.
And so what I love about this is that consciousness is not just an idea that you can intellectualize, but it can be measured. And the measurements, the results of the measurements can be seen in how the world flourishes around us or not. And to me, that's what's important, is that it's a measurable item that we can strive to improve.
Mm-hmm. And I think we feel it in our bodies. We believe our bodies are a very sensitive instrument to consciousness levels. That as we walk around the world, we're feeling into the space, like, is this safe? Is this a place I should be? Can I relax here? Because we're sensitive. Our entire system is, whether it's not just our physical body, but other energetic parts of us that are sensing the consciousness level. And it's a survival tool. So walking into a place that is low consciousness, we're on alert. That field, that feeling as we walk into that field is one of danger. We're walking into, a synagogue, a cathedral, someplace where there's been worship, loving worship for decades, centuries, that a high consciousness field is developed in that place, that we can feel uplifted and feel energy as we walk into that place, and get the closer we get to maybe the center of it, wherever the field is strongest, we'll feel that. So then, yes, that can translate into measuring. Now that we have a scale, the Dr. David Hawkins map of consciousness, that we can reference that scale in measuring and use our intelligence of our bodies through kinesiology and dowsing. Dowsing works as well to measure on that scale where things are, in a particular place at a particular time or over a period of time.
Well, it's wonderful that life does respond to energy. for instance, as a dowser, dowsing instruments reflect the energies around them. And so it's wonderful to have these tools that are, we could call them esoteric, because they're based on energy. And most people don't know about energy other than what it takes to run a mile, that kind of thing. And even then, there could be these consciousness energies that make it easier to do that. But it's fascinating that we're dealing with a subject matter here that I think we can all become more aware of in our lives and promote our consciousness level to get higher and higher, because it brings more good fortune, it brings more awareness, it brings more love. And why wouldn't we want to just go that way?
Yeah, and we also say it brings more freedom. So it's really freedom from parts of ourselves that may hold us back, patterns, beliefs, lower vibrating or lower consciousness aspects from our childhood or, early adulthood where we had traumas perhaps, or, were treated in certain ways, as we talked about a little bit beforehand, that the being in that higher consciousness zone, like the FLFE environment that we work with, but really any high consciousness zone that you go into, say if you go into a synagogue or cathedral, that those parts of us start to rise, that were maybe holding us back in some way, or at least causing suffering for us, and thought forms that we're ruminating over and over again, about something in the past or something that might happen. That freedom comes from those parts of us rising into the love zone, the 500s, as Clayton said on the Hawkins map, where we can start to be free of those patterns and just, be happier, more joyous, more abundant in our life.
Maybe that has something to do with the whole idea of loving your enemies. And that the only way to, that life can move forward correctly is for all the enemies to, I remember being taught to lie down together, and to, be in frequency with each other, that if it's a high enough frequency, it creates a difference between how enemies are recognized.
Yeah, we all know stories about, well, I'm assuming we all have heard stories about wars being postponed on Christmas Day, and people actually coming across the line and meeting each other, sharing food. And then the next day, they're ordered to start shooting again. And so just to your point, that is, would be a lovingness that is shared in celebration of some aspect of Christmas that people relate to. Maybe not everybody's a Christian, but the holiday season, goodwill to each other. And there is a saying that an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind.
I love it if I'm traveling in this city on New Year's Eve or Christmas, people shout out greetings to each other, strangers to each other. It's so beautiful to see.
It's the highest consciousness time of the year, by the way, Christmas time. If that's not already obvious.
Well, you know that because you measure that. See, what I want to get into, how you're working scientifically with this, because you are measuring so much in the world all the time. You can measure the consciousness of the whole planet and of particular events in the planet and how it affects consciousness, and pockets of it here and there, and where to find it and exalt in it, and so. We can do that in our homes. So I want to, before the show is over, I want everybody to know that they can actually get a free trial of a higher consciousness directed energy to their homes, to their particular address. I have one in my apartment. I'm very proud of it. That brings my apartment to a higher consciousness. And it's from you guys. It's FLFE.net. And it's, you can talk more about the details of that, but it's an opportunity to test to see what it feels like to be in this higher consciousness in your own home.
And we do use things like plants, and we can talk more about the plant studies, which really do measure this increased benefit or energy that's present. But yeah, in the FLFE free trial, there's no credit card or anything, but not to sell that, but it's important that people know that, is ways to turn the energy off, turn the energy up, turn the energy down, do boosts or extra high consciousness times to really become a consciousness researcher ourselves, besides just having this awareness and walking around the world and seeing how you feel in different areas of the world. But we have this control panel so that you can physically test it and experiment yourself, and that we really have this experimental scientific base to this, you could call esoteric, service.
Yeah, and that's what people can identify if they have it in their home. They can see how how their pets are behaving differently.
Yeah, sometimes people notice it more in their pets than they notice it in themselves. It's interesting. There's, if you have a friend that has a really good experience with Reiki or with Chinese medicine, that friend will typically be sensitive to high consciousness fields, and they're more likely to notice something like FLFE, or they'll be more likely to notice an environmental influence in the world as they're walking around. Then you may have another friend that you'll just say has a thick skin and they don't feel anything. And, that's part of their gift to the world is they have a thick skin. And the fact that they're not so sensitive doesn't mean they're not aware. It just means they have a different contribution to life. And so those people may not notice these subtler fields as much as your sensitive friend.
But they might behave differently because of it.
Absolutely. They have a different gift. They have a different purpose in the world. And so those people might, we have a couple of friends that are thick. We have one particular friend. My term of endearment for him is that he's a blunt instrument of the Lord.
I know a few of those.
Yeah, he is a blunt. He just does stuff. I don't know if he's fearless, but he certainly behaves fearlessly. And, he does important work in the world. So if you have some sort of thick-skinned friends, they try the service, they might notice their cats or their dogs, if they have pets, are just changed in their behavior. They're more calm, they're more playful, more energized. Or they might notice that the plants are growing better, that they're more vibrant, they're flowering for longer or flowering more often. And we do have, I think, 13 pieces of evidence on our research page now on our website. And we did a 10,000 acre organic farm study, Peter, and we had a 29.6% increase in yield, Jeff?
That one was a 22% average.
Oh, that was 22. Okay. Well, the spinach was 29, right?
That's right. Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. Yeah. Peter, the other way to, we were just talking about people that notice it and don't notice it. And we've partnered with Dr. Gary Schwartz. Are you familiar with him, Peter? Have you ever interviewed him?
Yeah. He hasn't been on the show yet.
Yeah. He's such an incredible scientist who is bridging these gaps between really science and frontier science. These things that we're talking about and you talk about in your courses, Peter, they're really frontier science. They're multidimensional experiences that are really, they're science. They're just not, it's just, we haven't evolved to the point where we understand it all yet. But he's, the first thing you do with frontier science is you really look at, well, what are the benefits? What's actually happening? Is it happening? Even before explaining what's happening. And so, we did research with the Institute of Noetic Sciences, where we use their Faraday cage room. They have a double Faraday cage room in their facility. And we they laid out 4 random number generators. Each one was actually had 4 number generators in it. And then it closed the door and we varied the consciousness level in the room.
From the outside of the room.
No, we activated a field inside the room.
Right, but you projected it from the outside into the room.
That's right. Yeah, we call it really activated. It's really activating a field through this quantum association that occurs with the FLFE system. So we activated a high consciousness field. We varied the level of consciousness, and they saw, an effect in the random number generators that was, not chance. It was a large effect.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And so I want the audience to learn more about this. And I guess, is there any better place to go than FLFE.net?
Yeah, if you go to FLFE.net under research, click on the research tab, you'll see these studies with Dr. Gary Schwartz. There's the plant study that Clayton mentioned, where it's actually 4 different plant experiments. And that really came from FLFE customer experiences. Hey, my plants look better. This is like way beyond the way my plant has ever looked. So we said, all right, well, let's start to quantify that. Like, what is the difference? And so we did control without the FLFE enhancement, the FLFE field, and then we actually did some special FLFE plant environments as well. And
we're getting near the end of the show, so I'm glad that you're doing all this science around it, so that it can verify how powerful FLFE is. So I'm so glad that we can do this, and I definitely want to talk with you more, because you're really at the cutting edge of consciousness and its opportunities for our advancement in life. So I want to thank you so much for all of that, and thank you for being on Energy Stew.
Appreciate you having us, Peter. Thank you.
Yeah, it's great to talk with you.
Oh, thank you. Likewise. And this is Peter Roth, your host of Energy Stew at prn.live. I can be reached at Peter at Heart River, HEART river.org. I'd love to hear from you, and thanks so much for listening.